In a post-apocalyptic world, where an artificially created pathogen has been responsible for decimating crops, animals and large human populations, most of the survivors have taken up residence in isolated cities known as citadels. In an attempt to survive, the outlying population who live in the forest exchange blood bags for seeds with the citadel, but these seeds only sprout once. Since her father fell ill, Vesper has invested in experiments with various plant species that sprout in the swamp in an attempt to find a cure for him, as Darius is breathing with the aid of apparatus. In the search for an alternative method to treat him, the girl, accompanied by her floating robot, which has her father's consciousness attached to it, breaks into an old laboratory and conducts experiments with the colored larva that Vesper found in the swamp a few hours ago. Hearing a sound coming from outside the lab, the young woman decides to go out to investigate and sees a pilgrim collecting materials nearby. Curious to know what these people do with all that junk, Vesper says that one day she will follow them, but her father, through the robot, forbids her to do so and says that the pilgrims just wander aimlessly until they lose their lives. When she returns home, the girl realizes that the place has been invaded and the power supply that sustains her house has been cut off. If this problem isn't solved, her father will soon lose his life, as all the devices that keep him alive have stopped working. When she leaves the house in search of a solution, Vesper comes across a group of people who live on the neighboring farm gathered to watch the elimination of a creature known as the Jug. This monster was artificially created in one of the Citadel's laboratories and has a characteristic scar on its back. Because he doesn't consider it human, Jonas orders the monster to be eliminated and sends one of his sons to attack it mercilessly. After watching this frightening scene, Vesper approaches her uncle and informs him that someone has sabotaged her generator. However, Jonas claims to know nothing about it and says he can't help her for free, especially now that the Citadel is raising the price of seeds. So the girl decides to give her blood as payment for the bacteria responsible for supplying the energy generators, as Jonas will later be able to exchange that blood for seeds. While Vesper's blood is being collected, Jonas tries to convince her to join the villagers with her father. However, the young woman knows that her uncle is an evil man and doesn't want to submit to his rule, so she says she'd rather continue living on her own until she can finally get out of that place. Once the blood has been collected, instead of making the payment, Jonas tells Vesper that she will have to wait 2 days to receive the bacteria, because first he needs to sell her blood to the Citadel. The problem is that Darius won't be able to survive that long without energy, which makes the girl desperate. In an attempt to save her father's life, the girl breaks into Jonas's warehouse to steal the bacteria and relies on Ed's discretion to avoid being caught red-handed. During the mission, she also takes the opportunity to take some seeds that were being planted in the greenhouse. However, when Vesper gets home and her father finds out what she's done, Darius orders her to return the seeds before Jonas notices. Upon hearing this, the young girl retorts and says that she will find a way to unlock those seeds to make them fertile. The girl believes that if she can do this, the Citadel will hire her to work in their laboratories. Later, while walking through the forest, Vesper comes across the body of a Citadel inhabitant who has been infected by the local plants, which are using her blood to obtain nutrients. When he realizes that she is still alive, Vesper decides to help her get rid of those parasitic plants and drags her home. After receiving medical attention, Camellia wakes up and tries to stand up, but her leg is badly injured, so she ends up falling to the ground. Seeing her rescuer approaching, Camellia asks where the man who was with her is, and Vesper says that when she found her, the woman was alone. Worried about her father, Camellia says she needs to find him, because the glider they were using has crashed in the forest and Elias could be seriously injured. However, due to the injury to her leg, the woman realizes that she won't be able to go very far, so she asks for Vesper's help to find her father. Promising that her help will be rewarded, the young woman says she will start the search the next day, as soon as the sun rises. After serving dinner, Vesper introduces Camellia to her father and reveals that he uses a robot drone to communicate, as he became paraplegic a few years ago while serving in the Citadel army. Upon hearing this story, Camellia offers to take the girl and her father to the Citadel and says that there they will be able to help him live a more comfortable life. Suddenly, Darius starts writhing on the bed and Camellia realizes that he is having a seizure. While Vesper is desperately holding her father, Camellia uses her powers to help him and manages to put him to sleep. In the morning, when Vesper leaves to look for Elias, the woman takes the opportunity to investigate every corner of the house and is surprised to see how people live outside the Citadel. When she finds the wreckage of the ship, she starts looking for traces of the body and discovers that Elias is still trapped inside the glider. Suddenly, Jonas appears on the scene with his children, and on seeing a Citadel inhabitant in trouble, the man decides to eliminate him, driven by a sense of revenge. At that moment, Vesper tries to stop her uncle from hurting that man, but she can't prevent Elias from being eliminated in such a cowardly way. After witnessing the crime, the young woman is forced to help Jonas dispose of the victim's body and loses all hope of moving to the Citadel. Instructed by her father, when she arrives home, Vesper claims not to have found anyone in the forest and reveals that her neighbor has a communicator that can be used to inform the Citadel about the accident. In the hope of convincing Camellia that she could be a useful citizen for the Citadel, Vesper decides to take her to see her private laboratory, where the girl experiments with the medicinal plants that she herself has created through genetic recombination. When she sees all that rich life, Camellia is excited to show it to her father, who is head of synthetic biology at the Citadel. When she returns home, Vesper takes care of her father every day, and when asked about her mother's whereabouts, the girl reveals that she left them a year ago. According to Vesper, the woman chose to travel with the pilgrims, a group of people who wander aimlessly, collecting scrap metal and wearing headscarves. The young woman believes that her mother just got tired of the harsh life she led there, so one day she simply decided to leave. Realizing how much this story saddens Vesper, Camellia tries to console her and the girl shows her a book she has been keeping in her closet. Since the appearance of the pathogen that wiped out almost all life on Earth, most animal species have disappeared and Vesper wonders if they ever really existed, as all she knows is the post-apocalyptic world. However, as she was born a few decades before the girl, Camellia can say with certainty that all those animals existed and gives details of what each of them looked like. While they have fun imitating the sounds of the animals, Vesper questions why the Citadel doesn't accept people like her as members of society. Camellia then says that if the government decided to take everyone in, there wouldn't be enough resources for everyone. The next day, Vesper breaks into Jonas's farm to try to steal his communicator, but her father's drone ends up being captured. When asked why she had invaded the property, the girl reveals that she had gone to collect her payment for her blood, but Jonas doesn't believe this story, as he knows that she has been stealing his seeds. As punishment, the man rips out one of the circuits in the drone that Darius uses to communicate and the robot loses its ability to fly. Seeing the device fall into the stream, Vesper goes to retrieve it and sees the body of Ed, one of Jonas's sons, dumped in a ditch. On the day the seeds were stolen, the boy was on watch, but decided not to report the break-in so that Vesper wouldn't be hurt. Unfortunately, the boy's negligence was paid for with his life and his own father had no remorse about eliminating him. Just then, the girl hears a group of boys approaching and tries to run away, as she soon realizes that she is being followed by Jonas's sons. After capturing her, the criminals use a device to mark Vesper's hand and then leave. When she gets home, she finds Camellia and the woman tells her that her wounds have healed, so she can go out and look for her father. On hearing this, Vesper decides to tell the truth and reveals that Elias has been eliminated. Not believing the girl's words, Camellia asks her to take her to the body, and when she sees her father floating in the water, the woman despairs. When she realizes that Camellia is giving in to grief, Vesper enters the river and drags her back to shore to try to console her. At that moment, the young woman sees a distinctive scar on the woman's back and realizes that Camellia is not just any human. The truth is that she is a jug, who was created by Elias to be different from everyone else. They were both fleeing the Citadel together when they fell into the forest, so no one came to rescue them. According to Camellia, raising an intelligent jug is considered a serious crime in the Citadel, so the guards were trying to eliminate her. To avoid losing his loyal servant, Elias made a deal with another Citadel so that they could have refugee passes, but they couldn't get there. Upon hearing this story, Vesper realizes that Camellia never intended to take her to the Citadel and is furious at having been deceived. When she returns home, she repairs her father's drone and tells him what happened. After discovering that his daughter has no chance of going to the Citadel, Darius advises her to run away, because now that she has been marked, Jonas considers her his property. However, Vesper refuses to abandon her father and considers the idea of handing Camellia over as payment for her freedom. At that moment, Camellia is in the next room and grabs a knife with the aim of putting an end to everything, because now that her master is gone, she sees no reason to go on living. However, seconds before the jug can complete her plan, Vesper appears and manages to stop her. Seeing the despair in the woman's eyes, the girl tells her that she can't just give up when the going gets tough, because everything can be solved if they help each other. That night, Vesper analyzes a sample of Camellia's DNA and notices that her cells have several nuclei. Seeing the girl frustrated at not being able to make any progress with her discovery, Camellia decides to play a song for her, as she used to do for her master while he was at work. When Vesper laments the fact that she doesn't have the same technology that Elias had at his disposal, Camellia says that she wouldn't want to live in the Citadel, because life there is like a frozen lake. According to the woman, in a world where everyone tries to live forever, life becomes lonely and joyless. As Camellia plays the song, Vesper notices that her cells react to the sound, and suddenly the nuclei begin to divide. When she adds a sample of the liquid extracted from the seeds, Vesper notices that the nuclei fuse together, and comes to the conclusion that this is the solution to unblocking the seeds in order to make them fertile. Excited by her new discovery, the girl says that they will never go hungry again, and Camellia realizes that this was the strategy Elias used to find shelter in another citadel. The man had already discovered a way to unlock the seeds and intended to use this knowledge as a bargaining chip. On hearing this, Darius asks the woman to take Vesper there, because if all goes well, the girl will be accepted as an inhabitant of the citadel. However, the girl knows she doesn't have enough resources to take her father there and says she won't abandon him. In an attempt to find a way to transport the man to the forest, the girl rushes to her old laboratory, and while she is away from home, Jonas appears. On seeing Camellia, the man tries to convince her to go to his house, but the woman refuses to accompany him, so he threatens to destroy the devices that are keeping his brother alive. In order to save Darius' life, Camellia agrees to accompany Jonas to his house, but before she leaves, the man realizes that she is a jug and decides that he will become her master. Just then, Vesper appears with a knife and tries to strike her uncle, but he manages to dodge the attack and hits the girl. Seeing his daughter in danger, Darius uses the drone to try to knock out his brother, but Jonas manages to knock him out with one punch. Just as Vesper is about to be eliminated, Camellia puts a blade to the criminal's neck, but the man pushes her against the wall. At that moment, Vesper gets up and hits her uncle with a stool. When Jonas gets up, Camellia hits his hand and the girl puts a blade to his neck. However, instead of eliminating him, Vesper decides to make a deal and promises that if Jonas agrees to help her, they will both have an endless supply of food. Before leaving, Jonas pretends to be willing to help the girl, but when he gets home, he contacts the Citadel and reveals that he knows the whereabouts of the jug they are looking for. At dusk, while Vesper continues her research, a ship sent by the Citadel flies over the forest, and suddenly a carpet of poisonous plants begins to form inside the house. After covering the entire surface, the vegetation evaporates and both Camellia and the girl have to hold their breath to avoid ingesting the poisonous pollen. At that moment, Jug realizes that her location has been discovered and decides to give herself up so that the government can spare the lives of Vesper and her father. However, they now know that the girl helped her hide, so if the soldiers find her, she will certainly be punished. In an attempt to prevent his daughter from being eliminated, Darius orders Vesper and Camellia to flee that night so that they can reach the southern citadel in time. That way, the girl will be able to trade her knowledge of the seeds for safety and live out the rest of her life comfortably. However, even knowing that her life is at risk, Vesper refuses to abandon her father, so Darius suggests a new plan. While Camellia and the young woman hide in the swamp, Darius waits for the soldiers to arrive and tells them that they are both in another citadel. Then, when the men leave, Vesper can come back for him. Upon hearing of this plan, the girl decides to follow her father's instructions. After all, there is nothing the government can do to hurt him more than they already have. Before leaving, Vesper lies down next to her father and hugs him. Meanwhile, Darius uses the drone to communicate with Camellia and asks her to take care of the girl, as he knows he won't be alive at dawn. At dawn, while a group of soldiers invades Darius' house, a second group goes after Jonas and the traitor is eliminated with one shot. Just as Darius is about to suffer the same fate, the man uses his drone to cause a huge explosion and manages to take out some Citadel soldiers along with him. Seeing her house on fire, Vesper despairs and tries to go back to rescue her father, but Camellia runs after her and manages to hold her back. While the girl is overcome with despair, the Jug hugs her and tries to console her for her loss, but at the moment there is nothing that can console Vesper. Suddenly, the pair see a soldier approaching and flee through the forest. Thanks to her knowledge of the area, Vesper manages to avoid being attacked by the plants, but the guard behind her is not so lucky. After getting rid of the man, the pair hide behind the vegetation and Vesper notices a new enemy approaching. Seeing the fate his colleague has suffered, the second soldier becomes more cautious and avoids coming into contact with the plants. While her enemy is distracted, Vesper crawls through the woods and guides Camellia in the opposite direction. Along the way, when it senses the presence of someone passing nearby, one of the plants emits a defensive sound and the girl ends up being caught by the soldier. To prevent the man from shooting her friend, Camellia decides to give herself up and Vesper runs to defend her, but they both end up being knocked down. After throwing mud at the soldier's helmet, Vesper manages to steal his gun and points it at him. Realizing that the girl doesn't know how to use the weapon, the man picks up a knife and walks towards her, only to be struck by Camellia. At that moment, Vesper throws the gun into a thicket of plants and lies down on the ground. knowing that the soldier is about to be eliminated. Relieved to have survived the attack, the girl hugs Camellia, and then they both walk south. However, during the journey, the Jug hears the presence of other Citadel ships approaching and comes to the conclusion that she must give herself up to save Vesper's life, because the soldiers won't give up the mission until they find her. When she realizes that she is about to be abandoned once again, the girl despairs and begs Camellia to stay by her side. In an attempt to calm her down, the woman uses her powers to make Vesper fall asleep and uses dried leaves to hide her body in the forest. Hours later, when she wakes up, Vesper realizes that she is alone, so instead of making her way to the Citadel, she decides to return home. When she gets there, all she finds is the wreckage of the cabin where she spent most of her life. While trying to process her grief at the loss of her father and Camellia, the girl digs a few holes in the earth to plant the seeds she has unlocked in the hope that they will sprout soon. Suddenly, Vesper hears something approaching and quickly rises into an attack position. Just then, however, she comes across some of Jonas' children. Now that their father is no longer alive, the youngsters have nowhere else to go and decide to follow Vesper. On the way, the girl meets a pilgrim and decides to follow her along with her cousins. As the days go by, the group of young people meet other pilgrims and the journey continues until they reach a village full of people wearing headscarves. Once there, Vesper comes across a large wooden building and decides to climb it in order to find out what's at the top. However, when she gets to the top and looks sideways, she is faced with two possible paths and has to choose which one to follow. On one side is the Citadel full of supplies and technology, where Camellia is possibly being held prisoner. On the other is a new opportunity for Vesper to restart her life without barriers and with the fertile seeds she has unlocked. So which path Vesper chooses remains a mystery. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.